Hello and welcome to the special edition of Leading Barloworld. My name is Nuzi Poshavalala, and it is an absolute privilege to serve you as the moderator of this all-important conversation happening live on LinkedIn right now. Now, we're here together because we are in conversation with respect to Barloworld's involvement in addressing and reducing gender inequality, and doing that specifically through Africa's very first gender-linked bond. Now, sitting with me here in studio today, and we're live at Barloworld, by the way, is the Group Finance Director. Her name is Nopasika Lila, as well as Relebohile Malahleha, who is the Executive responsible for Strategic Finance and Treasury. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nozi.
Now, one of the things we are going to be doing in this conversation is integrating your voice into the conversation. So please send us your questions, send us your comments and your insights. And as we get through some of our conversational elements here, we're going to turn to your voice as well. So please start sending those in as the conversation unfolds. Now, before we get started, I think it's quite important for us just to set the context of what brings us here. And part of that context is understanding, of course, that women are the cornerstone of society, and I think we all agree on that. But we also know that one of the ways in which they play that role is by being strategic facilitators of the conversations and the dialogue that bring about societal change. And that's why it's critically important that women are not only in the room, not only with the voice, but in their seats, being able to contribute to those decisions that affect change in society, and more importantly, are active participants in the execution of those decisions. And so it's within this context and within this aspiration that today we are talking about Africa's very first gender-linked bond. Now, I do also want to say, just for the sake of our audience, that this is not new at Barloworld. I mean, if we go back in history, as early as the 1970s, we see in the labor practices, we see in the processes, the systems, the organizational architecture, that Barloworld has always been at the forefront of gender diversity, of inclusion. And so it's not surprising then that we find ourselves today in this conversation talking about Africa's very first gender-linked bond, and doing that through this issuance by Barloworld. So let's maybe get into the first into our conversation. Nopasika, I want to go back. I want us to reflect on the journey a little bit. How did we get here? At this place where we are now talking about gender lens funding at Barloworld.
Thank you, Nozi. And allow me to first just thank you for being with us today, and also to thank the audience for participating in the conversation. A special thank you from myself to the Treasury team at Barloworld, led by Malahleha here with me. And I know she's supported by very committed young ladies, and it's Atli Kas, as well as what's her name? Rosetta Tamela. They've been behind the scenes working very hard to make sure that, we succeed in this process.
As well.
Oh, and Tombizina, thanks for that label. And we actually also had the support of R&B,
yes,
also behind the scenes in this project. I cannot forget to mention our CEO, Mr. Dominic Sewela, who's really behind, this gender promotion and gender equality. And so on, and as well as the board. But where did we start? So I recall a conversation between myself and Lebo late last year,
right,
where the daring Lebo was saying, you know what, we need to do something different. We need to reflect on our contribution towards ESG, and where can we, make a mark. And because of the space that we're in, which is finance, that is why and how we got into, in the finance space, how can we contribute? And straight into the bond space was where we could contribute quite extensively. So we spent a lot of time thinking about how this would work practically for Barloworld. Thinking about, would there be KPIs? Would it be product specific? Would it be something that would be acceptable in the market if we had to go out? And when Lebo came back to me this year, together with R&B, talking about this, it was a no-brainer to me. I said, guys, we are ready. We've done enough research. Let's go out and issue the bond. And really, this is how we, the whole gender-linked bond started. And I must also mention that also earlier in the year, we issued a sustainable linked bond in May. And this gave us then an opportunity to be specific in terms of what else can we do specifically for gender, because it's also one of the key priorities within Barloworld.
So I've heard so much richness in what you've shared. So one of the things that I'm hearing is, how do we look at a strategic lever like finance to show up for the things we say we believe in? What I'm also hearing you saying is KPIs. There is accountability that we're building in, and we're going to unpack that a little bit more. But also asking yourself the question as an organization, what else can we do? And oftentimes we see some changes at the periphery and get complacent and think that's enough. So I think that's really interesting, and hopefully we get to come back to a little bit about that. Lebo, let's just simplify things a little bit. I want to make sure that we're all on the same hymn sheet. What are gender-linked bonds, and how do they work exactly?
Thank you, Nozi, and thank you to the audience for being here. I'm going to try and make it as simple as possible, given the technical environment. But when we really talk about gender bonds, it's simple. We as an organization get to a point where we decide we need debt. We need to go and borrow.
Yes.
And because we are a listed entity as Barloworld, but also because we have registered to also list our debt. The other option of sourcing funding for Barloworld is through bonds. So then what we then do is we then go to market and then say, I need debt. In this instance, we needed about 900 to a billion.
Yeah.
And then the market, mainly institutional investors, then they respond and say, okay, fine, I can give you this money, but I want you to give it to me at this price, effectively. So we always have an intermediary, in this instance being RMB.
Yes.
So RMB manages, and it becomes the agent really in terms of getting investors and being the in-betweener, and then saying, okay, guys, you guys don't fight. So I'm going to be in the in-betweener, and I'm going to launch the auction. What price do you want? What price do you want to pay? So it just becomes an option of, okay, I'm on the other side and I say, I want to pay this. They're on the other side and they're saying, this is what we want to receive as interest. But what then becomes very much more interesting in this one is that then they actually then keep us true to ourselves in terms of the KPIs.
Yes.
So we had a lot of interaction, and you know, I also learned a lot of things like pink washing that came from. It's effectively just fronting.
Yes.
One of the investors talked about that. Because they are trying to ensure that when they invest in this instrument, they uphold their reputation because they are reputable institutions. And without really mentioning a lot of their names, we're very grateful to them.
Yeah.
We're grateful to the engagements, but we're actually grateful for those that intentionally invested in this instrument, particularly because it was a gender lens instrument.
Yes.
And there's those investors that came in just because of that. They had already invested in Barloworld. They had already maxed their credit lines, and they actually went out and committed, and we're very grateful to those. And they know themselves.
So what I'm almost hearing you saying is that there is an attraction to the idea of really putting gender at the forefront. So these are investors who already invested, but they're saying, this is something different, and I want to be a part of this.
They really wanted to take this to the market. We don't usually disclose our investors, but we're still grateful that they did it, because those that were keeping us true to what we were saying we're going to do actually did come through in terms of investment. I mean, we even had international interest in terms of people wanting to invest. Obviously, we didn't have a lot of time, but it was great. It's been great to see South Africa embracing this instrument. It's been great to see even the government, because we've spoken to women organizations. There's a woman organization, Wikona, led by Triforsa. They have embraced this instrument. They've spoken about it. I hear from different avenues where people saying, this is what Barloworld has done. Let's do it in this fashion, because they are also raising funding from the presidency's office, Wikona, and they are going to do something similar. In fact, they are arguing that this gender funding should actually be an asset class on its own.
So there's a tide changing, if I can, and that momentum is being felt. I'll talk a little bit. I mean, I want to come back to the KPIs. It's come up twice already, and I don't want us to lose that, because I think that's quite important, that there is that direct linkage to the organization and in terms of accountability in the organization. But maybe at a broader level, Nopasika, why pioneer this at this time for the business?
So thank you, Nozi, for that question. So Barloworld really is very deliberate about gender diversity. It's deliberate about inclusivity and so on. So, and to date, we've made a huge stride towards meeting some of our gender, targets. And so what we do really is focus on ensuring that we have representatives of, at gender level throughout the organization. Now, starting with, the board levels, we talk about the employees across the organization, and also supplier at supplier levels. So we're really deliberate about this, and we would like to see the demographics of the country also reflected in the workspace that we are in.
The hard question always, and Leba, I want to bring that to you, is what's the value, right? Because that's the at the end of the day, you've got shareholders, you're a listed company, and the big question is always, but what is the value that is going to be derived from doing this? And that's the question I want to put to you.
Nozi, also adding to how Nopasika was responding to the question you're asking as well, is that the numbers speak to themselves.
Yeah.
As private sector, we are a 75%, I think, employer. So we really create jobs in South Africa.
Yeah.
So if we do not participate in this, government has done their part. And we can't just talk about it on paper and on books. We, as the private sector, need to come through if we are a 75% employer and actually participate. But more than that, we drive the economy. We pay 80%, I think, of the taxes that come out of this country come from us. So money talks, they say. So because money really talks, if we do not participate in something that is so fundamental in a country that is probably to an extent almost fraught with the ills of injustices, whether you are talking about gender violence. And as you overcome these kind of things in terms of making sure that you put women in the forefront, you are hoping that you address the social ills. And this is really the bigger value. Forget about the fact that I said I was looking for 1 billion rand. So yes, I did need the billion rands. So we needed 900 to 1 billion rands. I did get my billion rands. In fact, given the competitive pricing that we got, we actually ended up getting about 1.143 billion rands because of the pricing and really that's really the instrument that we got. But it means a lot more from a value and from a pioneering and from the economy in terms of what we're trying to do and what we're trying to do and what we're trying to drive as a South African citizen being Barloworld.
I just want to pause on that because I think you've said something quite fundamental, and Nopasika, if you want to add on that, oftentimes when we look at the transformation conversation and we look at some of the listed companies, we always come back to the question of value and to say, but does the money really follow the case that we're making for transformation? And to hear you say, money talks, and actually the value is evident. If you look at the numbers, they actually are supporting the case for gender lens funding. And I think that's really incredible because it's a different type of conversation that we're hearing in South Africa when it comes to transformation. And oftentimes there's been that disconnect. And today we're hearing a very close alignment to say, actually, when you invest in women, you actually begin to see better returns and better value. Any comment on that, Nopasika?
Yeah, I think the mistake that a lot of people make is that, once you invest in some of these project, it is not going to generate the kind of income that you desire. What we've seen is that, when we talk about the pricing, we talk about anything related to these gender-linked bonds, they're very competitive in
Yes.
actual fact. And we're seeing a lot of investors wanting to use more of their funds in terms of some of the challenging different products that are available out in the market. And obviously there hasn't been any that are complex, well, as complex as this one, as it relates to specifically to the gender.
Yeah.
So we're seeing a lot of that. And if investors are also interested in contributing to the, bringing the balance back into the legacy of the past. This is now getting the women, into the workplace, supporting them out as entrepreneurs, and also from a Barloworld point of view, any organization point of view, making sure that they are in the supply chain from a support point of view.
Yeah, I think you've used beautiful language there. You talk about getting back the balance, and almost what I'm hearing is we're resetting the blueprint. And there are many investors and other stakeholders who are saying, we want to be a part of resetting the blueprint, and this is what's coming through. Correct. We want to build societies that look different to what we've had before. But I want to do a quick follow-up question with you, Nopasika. We've been talking, initially my question to Lebo was around value and externalized value, shareholders and that kind of thing. I want to bring it back home, inside Barloworld. Why is this important for the women in your organization? What does it say to them where they see that this is what my organization is doing out in the world? What value does that have?
So we've seen a lot of commitment coming through from, the staff members. And here, we're not only talking about women, but we're talking about both men, women, and male.
Yeah.
Because both genders are exposed to the women challenges that we've been experiencing. So the support, we've seen immense support also coming from the male folk when it comes to this. So women also, when they see us in leadership roles, they can actually see that it's attainable. They themselves can actually get to those levels. And they also see that Barloworld is not only just talking about these things, they are actually delivering on what we are saying. So it becomes something that is real, something that the younger generation also want to associate with. And in any point in time, they see themselves in those roles. So I think that is also just what it has been doing for the staff members. When we look at the support that we get from the board, also just looking at the demographics in the board, I think we're around 67% of our board is led by women.
Wow.
When we look at our exco, we're sitting at approximately just north of 50%, of which 44% is women.
Sure.
So, and once everyone starts to see what is actually being done, then it becomes a reality. And also in their own space, as whether they are managers or supervisors, they also then start to promote this empowerment and gender promotion.
Yeah, I'm hearing so much around going back to purpose, and using that purpose once to connect again with employees, but also for them to say, my organization, to have the pride to say, my organization doesn't only talk about these things, but actually this is what we're doing, and how that appeals to everyone. Those, older in the organization, younger coming into the organization, and across the genders. So this is a bit of a broader question, but I am going to come back to the bond, but maybe, Lebo, just to talk for a moment around conscious leadership. Because what I'm almost hearing as a bubbling theme underneath this is a very intentional way of showing up in leadership that we're seeing at Barloworld. What is conscious leadership in the context of Barloworld, and how does it play itself out?
Thank you, Nozi, and thank you for the question. I think, Nozi, to respond to this question of conscious leadership, maybe we just need to reflect on why we even exist and what we say as Barloworld is our purpose. Because we are a very bold organization. We are a very ambitious organization, as Nopasika talks about women and what we do, we are a high performance organization. We believe that. And the fact that we've got women having conversations about women does not mean that when we get out of this room, we don't have KPIs that we need to make sure that we meet. And that's both of us. When we set bold ambitions and we talk about money and we say we want to grow and double the intrinsic value. So we focus a lot on ensuring that people that want to be here, they actually meet their growth initiatives and they grow just in terms of their ambition, but also just from a high performance culture perspective. Yes. So we really focus on the high performance culture. That's one. Two, when we talk about consciousness, and when you speak to our head of HC Tantaswa, is that we need to be sensitive and cognizant to our environments on a daily basis. And this is be very conscious of the communities that we interact with.
Right.
And this is why you are seeing us talking about the procurement element, where we say we've got women businesses, let's make them work. We're quite conscious in terms of that.
Yeah.
But we also want, we're talking to, what you will see on the line is a lot of our employees. We're talking to our employees because we want them to live the values that we as Barloworld aspire to. When we say we want we aspire towards a world, we want to create a world of difference. It's because it's not about just Barloworld as an entity. Barloworld is people. So those similar people need to aspire to make a world of difference in their communities and most importantly, as we grow this business.
Yes.
Because that's really what keeps us there. That this is what gives us a ticket to actually exist. Which is the growth element.
A ticket to exist, a license to operate, and it's about translating that high performance culture into the communities, the stakeholders, and so you're bringing back to the surface procurement as well as one of the levers that you're looking at. I think that's and I think again, as I've said, it's such a refreshing conversation to listen into. So we've spoken KPIs or mentioned them 3 times. Time to talk KPIs. Okay, let's talk KPIs, Lebo. What are the gender-specific KPIs at Barloworld, and how do you go about choosing these particular KPIs?
Yeah. So Nozi, really, just looking forward, we would like to one day be sitting and talking about something else other than just gender transformation, because we would have done this. It will be a non-starter. We'll just be talking about business, given the fact that we want to grow from this business, and we've got these bold ambitions. So if you look at Barloworld, really, we've done well from numbers perspective. Nopasika talked about our board.
Yes.
And then she said, we sitting at around 60% at this point in time, of course, with a female chairman at the helm.
Yes.
Now, what we then did is we need this to trickle down. And it has to permeate the whole organization. I know that there's always an element of tone at the top.
Yes.
But this tone at the top needs to permeate right through the organization, and it has to touch all levels. And this is what we were trying to demonstrate by the KPIs that we put in. We might not have shown everything, because what we needed to show was the information that was verifiable, where we had actually even disclosed the information prior. But that's really the intention. The essence is that wherever you interact at any level, at any operation for that matter, you should be able to see diversity. You should be able to see women. Now, the first KPI, therefore, just talks about transformation of levels, of specific levels, grades that we've selected, ensuring that we've at least got 50% females in those levels. Now, what we have done is we've taken what is very evident to the public. So we've taken all of our divisional boards to make sure that all of those divisional boards, at least 50% of those are women. We've taken all of our divisional excos to make sure that all of those are at least 50% by 2025.
Yes.
Are female. We've also taken our exco. As much as it's sitting at 44%, we've said exco, it has to be at 50% by 2025, which is not a long time. And that's really what we have done on if you reflect on the first KPI. But the intention is much bigger than that as well. Now, if you go to the second KPI, it's procurement, which is what I was referring to. So what we're trying to do here is we're really trying to uplift women-led businesses.
Yeah.
Which is the businesses that are owned by women, 50% and above. If you look at this space and we then had to reflect on what information is available out there from a verifiability perspective, and I keep talking about verifiability. When we go to all of the technical people, what they want to see is, guys, you've got a strategy, it exists already. What have you been saying in your strategy?
Yeah.
And they go into the integrated report and they say, this is what you have said, these are your targets.
Yes.
Now, if you go to our if you go to our integrated report, you will see that we talk about all of the interesting things that we do around empowerment of women-led businesses, in particular using our vehicle Siakula.
Yes.
Which really focuses on supplier development. Now, what we have done then, we've said we're sitting at 13% in terms of to date, in terms of procuring from women. We have obviously achieved what the BEE Act requires of us, because the BEE Act requires about 12% of us, but we don't do this for the Act. We do it because it's a business.
It's not about compliance.
It's gone way beyond compliance.
Yeah.
It's about what is important for the South Africa and for the community that we live in. And we'd like to do much better than that. And you will see much bolder targets. So we've targeted 15% to make sure that we increase that to 15% by 2025.
Now, there's this concept that I love, which is called OPUR, OPUR, one person ultimately responsible. Now, as we talk about these targets, are these linked to particular roles? I mean, you talk about 50% women on all the divisional boards, on all the ExCos by 2025. You talk about procurement. You talk about, closing the gap between strategy and what actually shows up in the integrated report. You talk about going beyond compliance. And KPIs are always more meaningful when we know that there is an OPUR at the end of that KPI. That's my question to you, Lebo. Are these nice words on paper, or do we have OPURs in the organization somewhere?
Nozi, I'm really, really hoping that the ExCo of this organization is actually listening right now, because it was a very, very interesting conversation. So we've got governance, and our governance works.
Yes.
And for us to put something like this that is bold in the public, we just can't put that without actually making sure that it is adopted, and it will work.
Yeah.
Because first and foremost, I'm a finance person.
Yes.
If I don't achieve this, I get penalized. So we had to make sure that works. Now, what did we do? We boldly took this to the ExCo. And we had all the conversations. Yes, it's sitting here, but ExCo, now this is going to affect your pockets.
Yes.
And that lies in each and every CEO and each and every single head of departments, KPIs at this point in time. Now, we had a rigorous discussion.
Of course. I can imagine.
Not so comfortable at times.
Yeah.
Not so happy in some instances, in particular myself. But ultimately, we ended up with a very happy medium.
Yeah.
Because here we are today, and I'm really grateful to the support that we've received from our head of ESG, from our head of HR, that would have even given me much bolder moves, to all the CEOs that said it is doable, and in particular to our CEO Dominic Swela, that they said we can do it.
Sure.
Because if we don't put it there at the helm of the organization, it's just not going to happen.
Sure.
And maybe to add to that, Nozi, so this is sitting on Dominic's performance contract. So it's measured for every single individual. If we don't perform and deliver, we're talking about pockets here, we're talking about bonuses.
Yes.
It's going to affect straight his bonus, and therefore then cascading to everyone. It affects everyone's performance within the organization. So it's real. So on a monthly basis, we have the targets that say, if we are to achieve this amount by the end of the financial year, with this percentage by the end of the financial year. So on a month-to-month basis, how much should you be contributing towards that?
Yeah.
And on a monthly basis, we measure those things, and then they're part of the ExCo reports and so on. So it's the visibility of it is also quite important, so that people don't only see it at the beginning of the year when contracting and only at the end of the year, visibly throughout the year. We're looking at.
I just want to pause on that because I think the both of you have said something so powerful. You've spoken about ownership, Lebo. Nopasika, you've spoken about visibility. And I think those are critically important if we're really going to make sure that the things we dream about and the things we talk about, in your words, Lebo, are doable. And that's how they get done. So I do want to say to our audience live on LinkedIn, we're looking forward to your questions and your comments. Please start sending them through. I know that I've been hogging the ladies to myself for a long time, but we'd love to hear some of your questions, your own insights, even your reflections on this conversation. How is this moving you as you listen into the conversation? So let's go back to the gender-linked bond for a second. Nopasika, I want to come to you with this. Oftentimes, we'll hear increasingly now, when we tune into the market, we'll hear about social bonds, we'll hear about sustainability bonds. You issued a sustainability bond yourselves earlier in the year. Where does this particular bond fit in? And it would be interesting just to understand, because it would speak to the uniqueness of the bond in particular.
So, yes, Nozi, thank you for that question. So, yes, what has been out in the market for a very long time is gender-focused bonds, which really talks about funds being allocated and provided to an entity in order to, deploy towards gender-related projects. So now those social bonds really talk to, the bonds must be, there's going to be a process to measure it. There's going to be a process to ensure that there's continuous reporting. There's going to be a process of reporting in a financial statement, integrated report. And also there's a requirement for a third party or second party opinion in terms of where is the money invested. And so that brings a bit of restriction, or almost like it's restricted to specific projects. So that's what we've been seeing quite a lot. But what has been missing in the market is really then these bonds, as Lebo has alluded to, where it is a bond, but now it's specifically based on the performance, which is a KPI, and it's specifically related to growing women businesses, and then also lastly focusing to make sure that our supplier chain is also measured in terms of these bonds. So now there's no specific restrictions onto what product to actually invest in. So that's really the distinction for me between the two.
And it makes it a very unique bond in the market.
Yes, and hence when we launched it on the 23rd of August this year, it was seen as the first of its kind in Africa, because we've never had something of this nature. So also these KPIs, yes, there's a price that's linked to it. When we don't perform, that means when we don't promote women businesses, when we don't get women in our organization, we get penalized. That means we're going to be charged a handsome amount in terms of the product itself. So and that's why it's critical that we perform in terms of the commitments.
And it keeps coming back, I mean, to one, it's the accountability, but Lebo, you've mentioned it, you said this is about an expression of our high performance culture. Anyway, and so we keep coming back to, we hold ourselves accountable to performing in the areas that we've said we believe in and have issued this bond against. Now, there are other debt instruments, Lebo, in the market, whether it's green bonds or social bonds or sustainability bonds, as we've said. What are the disclosure requirements in particular that are specific to gender-linked bonds, if any?
It's an evolving environment in the South African spectrum at this point in time, Nozi. So what we have done, and that was really new, introduced by the JSE, is what we call this second-party opinion, where before we even take the instrument into the market, we actually needed an independent person that will come and verify whether what we say is actually the case in terms of the history. So if you are saying you're sitting at 30%, you really were sitting at 13%. But they take it beyond that. Then they say that, okay, fine. Are these KPIs really valid in terms of achieving what you mean to achieve, and in terms of ensuring that there'll be sustainability, in terms of ensuring that there's going to be transformation from a gender perspective. And these are the conversations that we then had with Ibis, who was doing our second party opinions. Now, subsequent to this, what you'll then see is when we go to year end and we then prepare our financial statements, and then afterwards we then say, this is our integrated report. When we're going to that integrated report, we're actually going to disclose exactly what we have done and what we have achieved.
Yeah.
And over and above that, we are going to have an external party also verifying that what we are saying we have achieved has actually been done. And then we're also going to have to again interact with the financial institutions, because it affects them either decreasing our interest or increasing our interest. So that's really what's going to happen subsequently.
Okay. So a little bit more technical, but I think important for the context of the conversation, maybe to you, Nopasika, who can issue gender bonds in the market?
So basically any entity that can issue, the bonds, any bond can actually issue these gender-linked bonds. But when it's specifically then relating to, the gender, then they need to adhere to the framework, which is then talking to the framework principles on, the gender sustainability and so on. So that's really what is required. So any business can actually issue these gender-linked bonds.
I want to pause on that because I think there's an underlying invitation in that to say, if we can all do this, what's stopping us from being part of the momentum and the change? And I'm not only thinking about South Africa, but I'm thinking on the continent, and how do we then tap into the capital markets in different ways in order to be able to issue gender-linked bonds? If you had a message to your peers, other group finance directors, CEOs in South Africa right now, what would you say to them?
Wow.
I love how she looks directly into the camera to speak to them directly. What would be your message? Because on the one hand, I think there's a lot of value in being a pioneer. But we always talk about that the real value is creating the pathways for others, the pathway for others to follow. And that's almost like the unsaid that I'm hearing in your response.
Yes. I think for me, Nozi, the message would be that, issuing a gender-linked bond is not something that is difficult to do. It's very, very simple. And it's something that the leaders can actually take advantage of, because it actually contributes to their ESG points as well, from a compliance point of view, if you had to go to compliance. But it's really something that is easy to do, and it's something that is all-encompassing when it comes to gender. And I think this is a space where all women will feel recognized, by the working environment. So I think it's something that we can come together and work on. We've been receiving invitations from various companies to come and talk to them. So basically also, extending our availability to have the conversations with the various companies should it be necessary if they do want to actually go, issue these bonds. And and I think this is, again, something we as women should come together to. This should not be a one-off kind of conversation. It is something that we need to continuously be engaging on.
And it's a question of, I'm almost hearing you say, for those who've been asking themselves the question, how do we go about being part of resetting the blueprint? How do we go about showing up for women in our communities, in procurement, in our organization? And you're saying, well, there is a way. We've walked down that pathway. It can be done. And actually, we're also available to come and share our experience about, the process of getting this done. And I'm really hoping that call to action is loud and clear. So we've spoken a little bit about who can issue gender bonds, and we're hearing that it's a much broader community that could actually answer the call. But who then can invest, Lebo, in gender bonds? And maybe you can talk to us about the experience of how the bond was sold in particular.
Thank you, Nozi. I think earlier on, I can't remember what question you had asked, and I sort of responded to the process that we went through with RMB, just in terms of the institutional investors that were available. So what then happens is whoever then is available, who the bank that you appoint, then goes out and finds these investors. They need to have excess cash, so it's often people that have got pockets, and that is why then you often then find institutional investors. But it's really somebody that has a program, and that's somebody that has got the cash to actually invest, and somebody that can make that call and say that, okay, fine, because I've got excess cash, I want to invest it in other corporates, and these are the corporates that I want to invest it in. You bank, go and find me that and get me this return. So so that's effectively really what it is.
And I mean, I think I mean, you speak about, I love your wording, you said they have pockets, right? Speaking like a real financier, right? So those that have pocket, and traditionally those have been pocket, as you've said, have been institutional investors.
Yeah.
Is there a world where that expands beyond institutional investors, and that the community of investors could expand, and what would that take?
It can expand, because I think, as I said, it's all about the money. Money talks. So I think it's really about where money is available, and it doesn't really matter who actually has the money.
Yeah.
And if for instance it was government, and government was saying this, that is also quite fine. It's just that it's often a lot of money when I talk R1 billion. And often it actually is probably people's money as well, from a different perspective, because what you find is that some institutions are able to pool money from consumers, or from bankers, or from savings.
Yes.
And then that fund is the one that actually invests. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you're looking at a corporate only, but that money that is being used by a corporate often is actually coming from small investors and small individual investors.
So I want to take maybe one or two questions from our audience, and just to remind our audience on LinkedIn that this is the opportunity to get your voice into the conversation. As I get ready for that, maybe, Lebo, I just want to circle back to something else that you said that I thought was quite important. I mean, you were talking about a number of initiatives in South Africa that are really pushing momentum around women or gender lens funding. You spoke about Wekona, which we know is all about 40% procurement across all sectors, across the value chain for women. What does this gender-linked bond mean for South Africa in particular, if we were to lift it up into the national narrative?
Nozi, ESG is something that is talked about all over the world. And we can decide whether it is a fashionable word that we're going to, that's going to be a point in time and it will go, or we can decide whether it's something that is absolutely fundamental for our existence. And we, as a South African entity, and I think as a South Africa, we are just responding to the ESG call and looking at it in terms of what is really critical for our community to make sure that we end up with a sustainable South Africa. And this is our response to ESG. You've got the United Nations having their SDG targets, very well written, and some of them, I absolutely agree with them. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure that we achieve equity and poverty alleviation at its core. And we make sure that we also close the gap between the rich and the poor in the process of running companies. And that's why we are trying so hard to make sure that we are very responsible as we grow, as we make the money that we do. Because we believe that what we're doing, as we overcome these SGD targets, as we overcome these gender-based targets that we're putting out there and inviting more people, we believe that we are going to do something. It might not be a lot, but we think we'll make a dent in poverty alleviation. And that's really what is absolutely fundamental, because it makes our life much better as Barloworld to live in South Africa.
And go ahead,
Nopasika.
Nopasika.
Just add to what Lebo is saying, and we found that if we are conscious in continuously looking for opportunities to promote the gender story, then we will find those opportunities. And at Barloworld also, as Lebo was mentioning, we've looked at opportunities in the equal pay for equal work, which is something that's a gap that was well, it's very clear in most entities to our, throughout the country. And again, that's our contribution to say, if a person is going to perform a specific job, then equally, then it shouldn't really be about the gender that individual is, but rather the role that person is fulfilling.
Yeah, I'm hearing two very important things. On the one hand, and where they converge is, corporate saying we're not going to sit on the sidelines. As you talk about the Sustainable Development Goals, we are in the decade of action where we're supposed to be accelerating action towards their attainment. 2030 is around the corner, and in some of the goals, we're seeing that we are going to miss the targets unless there is a stepped and marked change in terms of people saying, actually, I'm going to make this my problem. I'm going to make this my target. And it's so interesting to hear through your words, Lebo and Nopasika, to say, Barloworld is saying, we're not on the outside of the arena, we're in the arena, and we are about building back a better world together. And this is exactly what I'm hearing through the example of the equal pay, is that it's easy to say, well, we understand that's an aspiration, but we're going to continue with whatever our practice is. Rather, instead saying, actually, we know that this is important as a milestone towards the Sustainable Development Goals, and we're going to make it a reality in our organization. So I want to wrap it up with a quick question online. Lebo, it's a KPI question. It's your favorite, so I'm going to come back to you with this. Samantha is saying, how do you go about measuring the bond through the outlined KPI? So I think Samantha's saying, just bring it a little bit closer for me in terms of measuring the impact success of the bond against the KPIs that you've outlined.
How do you go about measuring?
That's what she's saying.
Other than just achieving the KPI.
Yeah.
So obviously it starts by achieving the actual KPI that you've put for yourself. So if I'm saying that I'm going to need 50% of women in grade 15, what I will have to go to do at the end of every financial year is to actually go count and see how many women have been employed by Barloworld and are sitting in that category. And I think this is the value and the cost on Barloworld's side that is not really seen in this, because Barloworld has to go and invest in ensuring that this actually happens. We think it's just doing business because we would have needed those employees, but we'll put more effort in ensuring that we do find these females to actually employ. And that means you're going to have to tap into the economically active community of women, which is not necessarily a lot because it's sitting at around 40% as we speak, to make sure that you actually bring forward those women that can actually do the job. And trust me, we do find the women that can do the work. So that's really how we do. Is that therefore from the perspective of maybe what Samantha is talking about, then therefore have we achieved in terms of what we wanted to do? Absolutely, because then what then happens is I go back to RMB, and RMB gives me 3 basis points per year. So they say, okay, fine, this is what you have done. You've gotten what you wanted to do to get at this point in time. So if your interest rate was 5%, that's just an example.
Yeah.
Interest rates are very high these days.
Much higher.
Then they will say, okay, fine, we're going to reward you, Lebo, by then decreasing your interest rate for the next year to 4.97%.
Yeah.
So that's really how it happens.
And I think it's an important explanation, because I think to the core of what Samantha's really asking is, how do you know you're moving in the right direction? Yeah. How do you know you're actually progressing? And how do the KPIs illuminate that and bring light to that? I've got a couple more questions coming through. Christian is saying this is an absolutely fascinating conversation. And he's saying, how do gender-linked bonds really change he calls it the habitat of business, which I think it's such beautiful language, Christian. The habitat of business. How do they benefit women in business in particular? I think, Nopasika, we're going back to the procurement story. And maybe we just want to make that link stronger for Christian.
I think for me, the first and fundamental is understanding that it measures and focuses on the behavior of the organization.
Right.
And behavior of the organization then also talks to the values and the culture that the organization is driving. So I think for me, that is where one would start with that. And then also what then happens is that once it is instilled in the values, then it's almost second nature in when people are transacting, they are conscious of it.
Yes.
And also to the point that Lebo has mentioned, when we achieve targets, obviously we'll achieve over a period of time. As we achieve targets, we get a reduced interest rate. What that means, reduced interest rate means that our funding costs are reduced.
Yeah.
Therefore, straight into our income statement as a reduced cost, therefore increasing our profits. So you can see exactly the flow in terms of where it ultimately ends in terms of the benefits.
And it's a direct link again. And I mean, coming back to the comment you made earlier, Lebo, to say this is evidence of, the business case for gender in play, because as you're saying, it goes right back to the bottom line, and you can see the difference on the bottom line. Go
And
ahead,
maybe,
Lebo.
Nozi, if I can add to say that, when you're going through a change, there's certain things that you need to do that are different. Otherwise, it would have happened if we just did what we used to do yesterday. And this is why when we talk about what we have done as Barloworld, we talk about the likes of Siakula, the likes of Mbeu. Because we actually had to put in a structure in the organization that goes out and seeks women-led businesses.
Yeah.
And then have conversations. I mean, about a month ago, we actually had I think it's a conference where we had invited a lot of businesses to say, this is what we do as Siakula, and we invited a lot of corporates as well. Because we need to have these conversations, and we need to invite them because they don't know where to go.
Yeah.
And then you've got somebody that is dedicated to saying, guys, I know that you are selling starch there, or you're selling caterpillar there, but here are the businesses that I think you need to put into your procurement system to make sure that we achieve our targets. And that is why, because we've had people that are focused and that are engaging in the market to ensure that if we've got a woman out there that wants to deal in however way in the mining equipment, then they are able to reach out, and then somebody internally is able to push that agenda, because otherwise it would be very difficult to then change, other than obviously putting it in the KPIs.
So I get what I'm hearing is that closing of that asymmetry of information, because oftentimes the narrative becomes, well, we don't have the information about where to go.
Yes.
Right? Where do women go and find these opportunities? We talk about wanting, to empower women in business, but where exactly? And I'm hearing, actually, we're doing the work of actually going out there and talking about different funds so that we can get women in. There's a beautiful question from Lila, Gianni, and Lila is asking us to go inside Barloworld. So I'm coming to you, Nopasika, on this one. And then, Lebo, please feel free to add. And then Lila is saying, are there opportunities to commit to increasing gender equality with regards to retention, pay, and promotion? In addition to that, what family-friendly policies, services, and benefits could be put in place? So, Lila is saying, this sounds great, but I'm also interested in the experience of women inside Barloworld, and is there scope to do more than what's already in place?
I think, we as part of the measurement, because these things have to be measured,
right?
Yeah, in order to ensure or check how we're doing. So we perform numerous surveys in terms of the numbers and also the experience of the individuals. And this is quite a passion of our HC leader Tantaswa in terms of gender diversity and so on. So we do have all those metrics and ways of measuring how we're doing. Also, in terms of policies, we do have our group policies, which are cascaded down to the various businesses to make sure that they also execute. So as an example also of ensuring that we deliver on this, Barloworld has 2 CEOs that are women. This is now in their divisions.
Yes.
And I think of SMD, it's Linda Saroka, as well as at Avis, we have Ramasela Ganga. So because we are conscious about it, and we also ensure that the experience, they don't only see female representatives at corporate, but also at the divisions, right there where, the people are at. We also just had a fantastic promotion of Andronica Masemola into a CEO role. This is now at Barloworld Equipment Southern Africa.
Yeah.
So this is brought down to the
It's distilled. Yeah.
right to the bottom in the organization. We have leading young ladies in the as technicians. We have them in various roles within the divisions. So it's not really in fact we don't even restrict them to what has been traditionally a man's role.
Yes.
If a woman is interested in that, you will find them there. And we do have the statistics that does measure that for us. And opportunities are given to women across the organization, because the fact that you may be in starch, as Lebo is saying, does not necessarily mean you will stay in starch. Some resources are shared right across the group. And when there are opportunities in the various businesses, then we have something called the ICR, which staff members would indicate their aspirations, where they see themselves in the next few years, and which businesses they'd like exposure to be exposed to. So when those opportunities do come through, we look right across the group to see opportunities then for women and so on.
So it's such an interesting way of linking back to your earlier words. You said this is about encouraging a change in the behavior of an organization. And what I'm hearing is you're saying we are practicing ourselves what we're hoping through this gender link bond we are preaching to everyone else. We're learning and along the way, we're trying along the way, but we're deliberate and intentional about that. Now, I'm almost at the end of these, and I can see, so as you can see, I'm cheating because I've got all the questions coming through on my device, and I can see there's some hectic typing that's happening. So I probably want to squeeze one more in. But as that question comes through, I do want you to reflect on what I'm going to close with. And the question I'm going to close with is, what's next? Because that's always, the thing we want to leave with is to say, this has been absolutely fantastic. It's been a first for the continent, first for the country. It's adding momentum to what we've seen is, some really good initiatives. But this is different and this is unique, and we wanted to celebrate it today. But what comes next in terms of Barloworld's continuing its practice of leading in a diverse workforce, of putting women at the forefront and being unapologetic and intentional about getting that right. So these typing fingers aren't fast enough. I'm running out of time. So I'm going to go to Lebo first, and I'm going to end with you, Nopasika. What's next?
Nozi, we are very practical and pragmatic organization when it comes to approaching matters of this nature. And in fact, because they speak to so much to who we are, we only do it if it is absolutely critical and fundamental and it's important for the business. And that is why we are able to pick something like a gender lens bond. So we will continue to make a world of difference where it matters in the communities, and when I say in the communities, that's because Barloworld is not just a South African company.
Yes.
And as the name says, we exist in African communities. We exist in some European communities, and we will continue to ensure that this that we have started here in South Africa permeates through all of our operations all over Africa and everywhere in the world where Barloworld exists.
We will continue being the keywords, and also you've lifted the beautiful phrase of where it matters and in our communities, and our communities are broader than just South Africa. Nopasika, from your perspective, what's next?
So Nozi, Barloworld in this 2022 year is celebrating 120 years of existence. So one is looking at another 120 years, if not more. And the face of Barloworld would be different at that point in time. And what we've been experiencing is a lot of calls from stock exchanges. And the one that comes to mind now is the Luxembourg Stock Exchange inviting us to, participate, in these conversations, in Luxembourg and so on. And So what we're seeing is as we learn and progress with ensuring that we deliver on the gender-linked bonds, we instill the high-performance culture by women in the workplace. We do, really see that we would like to find even more opportunities. We would like to find even more companies to work with us in ensuring that we assist in the transformation of the greater economy.
To the next 120 years it is. So I thought a beautiful way to close off this conversation is to just read 3 really amazing comments. Ankona says, this is great progress on women and emancipation. Cindy says, a great initiative. This is a great leap towards investment in women. Barloworld is walking the talk. And Eugene says, amazing work done by Barloworld to drive gender transformation. I think those reflections really capture how this conversation has landed and how it's been received. So it's a big thank you to Lebo. It is a big thank you to Nopasika. And for myself, Nozipho Shabalala, it's been an absolute privilege to be a part of this historic conversation at the launch of Africa's very first gender-linked bond. Thank you so much for your questions, your comments, and your engagements. It is goodbye for now.
Thank you, Nozipho.
Thank you, Nozi. We did thank you.